If your marketing is not working inside of your practice, honestly, if anything in any department is not working inside of your private practice, it might not be because you need to do something new or more. It might just because your current thing is broken that you've already built. This past week, I was doing some audits with some therapy practices, and I discovered broken phone numbers that have been up for months, broken forms, opt-in forms on their website that have been broken for months, causing low turn-in for new leads and new client inquiries. So today, we're diving into the realities of broken marketing, reality of broken procedures inside of a private practice. And the larger you are, the more likely that this is probably happening. So how do we fix it? Where do we look first? Where do we go from here? Let's dive in and help grow your practice today.
Yeah, the thing about marketing, guys, is if it's broken, you don't just miss out on the upside of marketing, but you're literally missing out on all of the downside as well. Like you're usually spending money and you're spending time
Yeah.
where your acquisition is just not where it needs to be. And so if you have clinicians that are just waiting around or you are just waiting around, that's dollars that you are spending, that's time that you are spending that you're not collecting new revenue. And so there's a massive downside to not having marketing working. And then there's the upside of if you have marketing working, you can capture this upswing of things. And so fixing your marketing and being attentive to your marketing is like one of the largest things that we'll call it like the CEO position, but like the leader in your organization should be in charge of. And in smaller practices, you don't have a lot of data. You don't have like 100 leads coming in a month. And when 1 month it goes down to 80 leads a month, you can't be like, all right, something's happening. Let's go audit. So in smaller practices, you have to be on top of this very frequently. And that means like going top to bottom regularly in your opt-in process, in your attention getting process, and in your intake process, and being certain that everything is in place for you to be able to collect those opt-ins, get the attention, and get the people on the phone and talk to people so that you can onboard new clients.
Yeah.
And for larger practices, like I kind of alluded to, you have data. And so there's information that you get on a regular basis that should indicate when things are changing. And especially like 10 or 20% changes, that's not normal. That's not normal to have, which means something is probably broken and something is probably like not working as well. And you need to be able to isolate and identify what those issues are quickly. Otherwise, you're just going to flounder. You're just missing out. You're gambling with your practice. You're gambling with your practice.
In a second, we're going to get to a more like nuts and bolts, maybe audit, where to start, some layers for you to check in, how often to do it. But there's two other, what I'd say, practice culture pieces that success actually stems from. And it's kind of two different frames. The first is a concept: profitable practices that have accomplished the goals that you want to accomplish, probably, and more often than not, do not have a secret weapon, information you don't already have, hidden secrets to the universe that they've discovered that have gotten their practice to go to multi-seven figures and scaled up from there. Great businesses that have more profit and are doing better are on the spectrum of healthy. And it's often because they're just doing all of the little things at scale in a great way. All of the little things that need to get done in a great way at scale. And the struggling practice is typically doing a portion of things well to get to the size that they are, and then a portion of things not well across the fold on the little things. And it's often the little things that kill. And then that leads to this cultural sentiment that needs to come from leadership. You as the owner, your leadership team, your management team, if you have it. And that's a do it now, fix it now culture. If we find something, if we see something, we need to immediately have the culture of we're going to fix this now. We're going to do this now. And without that, things will pile up in a significant way inside of your practice over time, especially the larger you get, and it will actually make it more difficult over time to reach the goals or run just the business day to day at the level that it needs to be done.
Andy Grove had who was the mentor to guys like Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, the really big business guys. He had a quote that said, "If you wait until a crisis is obvious, it's already too late." Okay, so
Yeah.
if you wait for a crisis to be obvious, it's already too late. And then I'll add to that as well. Oftentimes, in order to do what Josh had just said, which is do the little things right at scale, oftentimes in order to do that, you need to simplify what's there. So I'm talking about, instead of having like 5 options for people to be able to opt in and connect with your team, maybe you just need to have 1 or 2. Like, give us a call and fill out this form. And then you build your systems, you build your team around those procedures and protocols. That way you can just do those 2 things really well.
Yeah.
So instead of having like those 7 super distinct booking widgets, every one of your therapists has a different conversation, and you have this like massive system, or you have so many requirements to just get in contact with you. Or if you've really just created a system that maybe you created when you were a solo, that was helpful when you were a solo, but it doesn't really benefit your group practice. And maybe that's like slowing down the pacing, like making it more difficult for someone to reach out for the first time. All of these things just compound and just really make you move through the muck and the mire as you're kind of going
Yeah.
through here. So I guess we can go ahead and
Definitely.
get started with what should you audit, Josh?
Yeah. There's a couple things. Let's just talk about front-facing assets first, because this is going to affect your marketing performance, number one. This looks like phone numbers, right? Earlier this week, it was a phone number that I called the main phone number in their website on their contact page, called it, literally disconnected. This can go even further. Like, great, what happens, right? Can we go through the phone tree? Do all the endpoints of those numbers actually go to the correct place? Can the person leave a voicemail? Does that voicemail give a notification to someone if a voicemail is left, right? Do all the parts of it work that we need to work in the way we want it to work, from it working in general to the final delivery of a notification to a missed call or a workflow or whatever else? Is the number listed appropriately? Are all of our Psychology Today numbers and tracking numbers, right? Phone numbers are a huge piece that you need to audit consistently, because things change, things happen, whether you think it's going to break or not. And then other front-facing assets. This looks like all of the buttons on your website. Literally anything that someone can click to a new page, to a new process, to a new form. Does it work? Does the opt-in form actually submit and notify someone on your team? All of those pieces. Anything that a front-facing person could read, could click, could call, could email, does it work? And I really recommend that you probably need to look through this pile every like 3 to 6 months, just to make sure it's all there, because you'd be shocked at how many times on a weekly basis I talked to a practice owner and they just were like, I had no idea it was broken. And that's why the audit has to be there.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about maybe simplifying some of these things, and then Josh, I'll let you run through the rest of the audit. But like, when we're talking about testing all of the website buttons and forms, we mean it, right? Like, you go through everything. I think if you're prioritizing, you can maybe pull up Google Analytics and see what are the top traffic pages to see where maybe you need to go first. So if you have a page, maybe your top 10 or 15, 20 pages, go to those pages first, just test the stuff. Make sure it's easy, right? I'm talking about reducing the burden or reducing the barrier
Yeah.
for entry for your practice. And then this comes back to just simplify, right? So don't have maybe 15 different forms per clinician. Maybe just have one form that goes to your front desk, and then your front desk has the responsibility to coordinate who they need to talk to next. And so
Yeah.
create simpler processes, right? Marketing is abstract and big, and it's present, and we're reaching people in different veins because they're coming from different places. But the objective is to point to a single point so that you can simplify the process and dramatically reduce your administrative activities, dramatically reduce how much stuff you need to check every 3 to 6 months, and just overall improve the smoothness and efficiency when it comes to someone reaching out and getting help through your practice. So the
Yeah.
other note on the calling front-facing phone lines, some of you guys may have like a number pool. If you're familiar with uh, phone tracking, so if you have a number pool, make sure that the dynamic insertion is working well, right? So this
Right.
is like some technical web thing. So make sure your dynamic insertion is working well. Make sure your phone numbers are clickable. Like if someone can click it, especially on mobile, since now we're seeing about 65% of traffic come from mobile. Um,
No, That's
you know,
that's a good point. Often website editors and other places will have different visual outcomes for your mobile versus your desktop. I honestly, admittedly, make that mistake often as I'll build a nice, beautiful thing. And then like 2 days later, I'll go pull up on my phone. I'll be like, oh shoot, I didn't change everything I needed to change, right? Extra layer of testing was needed there.
it's a non-negotiable at this point to have a phone number just clickable from
Yeah.
mobile. Like that is such a simple thing that you can do to streamline, because no one's going to sit there, copy and paste it, throw it into their phone, and that's just like you're crushing it. It's almost faster to just Google search someone else at that
Yep.
point. So just keep that in mind. Like actually, so I'll let you continue on with the audit.
Sometimes, and this is just a quick suggestion, when you're doing this audit process, it's difficult to do it yourself if you're the one that really built or were in the weeds with the assets. I find that. And so often also means someone else on your team to do the audit. We built an event opt-in page a couple weeks ago, and I sent it to one of my team members, and she found a bunch of things, very quickly that I was like, oh yeah, definitely should change that, that, and that. Just because it was a fresh set of eyes that wasn't just looking at it or testing it in the same ways. So sometimes it's about blind spots going into it as well when you're doing this work. A couple other suggestions for you. One, make sure all of your workflows and automations are firing. Have a list of your critical workflows and make sure they're working the way that you're supposed to. And then in these audits or in the check-in, make updates. Attilio and I recently went through every single tag that we use to tag clients and customers and other things inside of workflows that have added up over the last 5, 6 years. And we just gutted the list. We're like, do we use this anymore? Do we not? And it was a time to both audit, make sure what we wanted was working, and remove stuff that was bloating over time. It's kind of like your house. You sort of collect stuff over time that you think is useful. And there comes a day when you're like, nope, don't need that air fryer anymore. Time to get rid of it, open up some shelf space. And that's okay. And then lastly, we could spend a ton of time talking about it. You must audit people and the processes that people follow and the systems that people use to implement and follow those processes. Your business is people and it's run by people, and either people will stop following it the way that they're supposed to, or other things happen. We see this with intake often. A practice owner will be like, my intake team just is not performing. And when we do an audit, well, they stopped using the scripts. They stopped saying things that they were supposed to say. They stopped following a process you spent a lot of time building, sort of like a boat drifting away from center. And your job as the owner is to bring everything back to center of a good working process. So just know that, especially when it comes to people, organizational drift is natural, and it's your job to bring it back to center. And if you haven't done that recently in kind of all of your departments, this looks like clinical retention to marketing performance to intake to all of it, right? You're probably pretty far off from center, more than you think, and simply dialing it back in could produce the growth that you're looking for.
Yeah, when we're talking about like the workflows and automation, double checking, like yes, it's important to make sure that when someone fills out a form that the person gets like a confirmation email. But I think one of the lesser paid attention to is like the notifications for your team. So who on your team is getting notified? Who on your team is responsible for handling these segments? Where are these notifications going? How are you managing your pipeline? How are you handling when people leave the pipeline? When people
Yeah.
stay in the pipeline? What does that like? What does that switchboard kind of look like for your practice? And is that working? There's a lot of practices out there that we see and work with that simply they have maybe one notification when someone first comes in, and then after that it's just nothing. You're just looking
Yeah.
at the board, and maybe there's different systems in there that are more useful to your team. So talk to your team, communicate with them, ask them based on these expectations, how can we move closer to this goal? Do you need extra notifications? Do you need extra? Do we need to change the notices? Do we need to move people down different pipeline stages at different time frames? Leverage systems, leverage automations here to help improve visibility, help improve the connection rates, and help improve just the overall process for your clients. And when
Yeah.
we talk about people and systems and these processes, Josh, I think you said every 4 to 6 months, you should be auditing. But guys,
Yeah.
if things are breaking, like you should be in there like consistently, right? Daily, even. If something is broken, you need to be like on it. This is one of the areas where you are simply losing the most amount of money. And
Yeah.
some of you just cannot afford to not look at this more frequently.
So within that, that kind of goes to the earlier statement of like, do it now, fix it now. If you are growing a larger organization, I think one of the pain points that happens as a great manager, as a great CEO, is that your day to day is actually spent just solving problems, mending broken fences, identifying bottlenecks, delegating resources. And it's to some degree a very negative feedback loop if you are observing it from the wrong perspective as a practice owner. You exist sort of at the top of your food chain because you have solved a high volume of problems to build a practice, build an entity, and get where you are going. You probably have your closest, right, to all the problems and all the pieces because you constructed it, even if you started to delegate and hand off different elements. And there's probably not many other people or anyone else in your organization that's taking ownership of final problem resolution. That is literally what you're being compensated for as a business owner. You aren't being compensated to just own the business. If you're inside of your business operating it, you're being compensated to keep it alive. And keeping a business alive means consistently, fluidly, and efficiently resolving problems. That is literally your job as the key owner because there's probably not anyone else on your team that's going to do it at the volume or at the specificity. You're there to solve big problems, and you're the only person to do that in a small organization.
Unless you're paying for someone else to do it, you got to do it.
Yeah. And that's, I think, both empowering and it gives you the roadmap for success because when you implement simple systems that work, you're able to pass those off and they'll work for longer for your business. And if you find yourself sort of always solving really like tacky, stupid problems that you're just sick of, maybe it's time to take a step back and look at what's been implemented overall to make sure that when you do implement solutions, you're not using, duct tape on a broken pipe, like we're actually replacing the pipe with something better that's going to work and not just short-term things that's always going to need mending in some of those layers.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll catch you guys next time to help grow your business more. Cheers.
Yeah.